Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Lily Evans adjusted her beret, the Marine emblem catching the cold fluorescence of the conference room lights. Around her, laughter drifted from the senior officers like smoke, warm among themselves, but choking to anyone outside the circle. She wasn't one of them yet. Just a cadet. Just a kid. The kind they smiled at but didn't see. They were preparing for the Marine Corps birthday ball, an event she'd been assigned to help coordinate because young blood should learn tradition. It wasn't the tradition she'd imagined. More politics than pride, more ceremony than soul. Still, she tried to stay focused, clipboard tight in hand, counting table placements, remembering the order of dignitaries. A test in its own quiet way. Her grandfather had taught her that. Grace under pressure, he used to say, that's the real mark of a Marine. He was coming tonight, James O'Donnell, 86, gray, slow, still carrying the posture of a man who'd seen command. She hadn't known much about his service. He never talked about it. Only hints. A single patch on his old jacket, a serpent wrapped around a lightning bolt, and a faraway look when the helicopters flew too low. She had grown up with the sound of silence, his silence, and she respected it. But tonight, that silence would be broken in a way none of them expected. The lobby of the grand majestic hotel glittered like a palace of mirrors. Every step echoed on marble, every metal reflected twice over. A string quartet played something classical, almost sad under the chatter. Marines in dress blues, officers' wives in silk gowns. Laughter, pride, and the smell of champagne. And in the middle of that gleaming sea, an old man in a weathered leather jacket. "Excuse me, sir, is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the music, crisp, clipped, sharp. Captain Kyle Evans. His posture screamed regulation. He stood flanked by two younger Marines, faces smooth with discipline, eyes darting for direction. His tone carried the weight of a man who'd never been told no. James O'Donnell didn't answer right away. He simply stood at the check-in counter, one hand resting on the polished wood, the other loosely at his side. His eyes weren't on the captain. They were somewhere far away, in a place no one else could see. Lily stepped in quickly, her voice strained but polite. "No problem, Captain. We're just checking in. My grandfather was invited to the ball tonight." Evans' smirk barely moved, but it was there. "Invited," he repeated. "This is the Marine Corps birthday ball, miss, for active duty personnel, esteemed veterans, and their registered guests. We need to keep the entrance clear." He looked down at the old man, at the faded jacket, the frayed patch on the sleeve. He didn't see a Marine. He saw clutter, a relic in a room built for polish. Lily felt her pulse quicken. The captain's words had that particular tone, not quite rude but dipped in something colder, contempt wrapped in courtesy. She fumbled for the envelope in her purse. "His name is James O'Donnell. He was invited by General Morrison himself." That name gave the captain pause, just a heartbeat of hesitation. But arrogance reasserted itself like a tide. He took the invitation, glanced at it without reading, and said, "I don't recall that name on the general's list." He was lying, and everyone knew it. Eyes began to turn. Conversations softened into whispers. A ripple of curiosity passed through the lobby. Lily felt the weight of it, judgment pressing from every angle. She hated that feeling, being watched, not for who you are, but for what someone thinks you're not. Her grandfather still hadn't moved. Evans leaned in, his tone mockingly patient. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification, and your invitation." James O'Donnell's gaze lifted finally, his pale blue eyes finding the captain. Calm, steady. No defiance, no fear, just stillness. It was the kind of quiet that made noise feel cheap. Evans mistook it for weakness. "You're not listening, old man. This is a private event. You and your granddaughter need to step aside." "Captain," Lily said, her voice trembling, "my grandfather." He cut her off. "Miss, please, everyone served once, but this event is for a certain caliber of Marine." The insult hit harder than any shout. Lily's throat tightened. Her hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream to defend him, but her grandfather placed a gentle hand on her wrist, light, calm, grounding. He didn't need her to speak. Evans gestured toward the patch on the jacket. No uniform, no ID. For all I know, this is just an act. He reached out and tapped the patch with his finger. What is this thing even supposed to be? A souvenir. The moment his finger touched the worn thread, something changed. For James, the lobby faded. The marble floor dissolved into mud. The air thickened with jet fuel and gunpowder. He could hear the rotor blades again, the hard chopping rhythm of a huey fighting jungle wind. He could smell the rain and the blood and the smoke of burning palm trees. That same patch, new, bright, alive, glinting on the side of a gunship cutting through chaos. And then silence again. The memory retreated as quickly as it had come. The old man blinked once, returning to the sterile lobby and the crowd's stares. Lily noticed something in his eyes, a flicker. Not pain, not fear, something deeper, like a door had opened and something very old had looked out. Evans saw none of that. To him, it was just an awkward pause, an old man lost in thought. He turned away, satisfied that he'd made his point. Let's move along, sir. This area needs to stay clear. Across the room, near the marble pillar, another man had been watching. Gunnery Sergeant Miller, hotel security chief, former Marine, 30 years in uniform. The kind of man whose silence carried authority. He'd seen this scene before, different faces, same arrogance. Young officers drunk on rank, mistaking respect for fear. And he'd seen that look in the old man's eyes before too, once long ago, in men who carried ghosts on their shoulders. Miller's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Captain," he said, his voice low, heavy with warning, "everything all right here?" Evans didn't turn. "All under control, Sergeant. Return to your post." The words hit like a slap. He'd called him Sergeant, not Gunny, not Mr. Miller, Sergeant, like a reminder that he'd never rise beyond enlisted, a deliberate humiliation. Miller's expression didn't change, but behind his calm eyes, something hardened. He stepped back, not in surrender, but in calculation. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Colonel Henderson," came the brisk voice on the other end. "Sir, this is Gunny Miller. You need to get to the lobby right now. Captain Evans is confronting one of the general's guests. Name's James O'Donnell." The pause on the other end was long, too long. "Did you say James O'Donnell?" "Yes, sir." The line went dead. A second later, Henderson was on his laptop, fingers flying, opening an encrypted database no one was supposed to touch. The name appeared, redacted lines, classified files, but one word stood clear under designation. Project Viper. The colonel's stomach dropped. He grabbed the phone again, dialing another number. "General Morrison," he said, breathless. "Sir, you need to come down to the lobby, now." "What is it?" the general asked, irritation heavy in his tone. "It's James O'Donnell." The silence that followed felt colder than steel. Then the general's voice, low, dangerous. "Tell Evans not to lay a hand on him. If he so much as breathes wrong in that man's direction, I'll end his career myself." He hung up before the colonel could answer. In the lobby, Lily could feel something shifting, though she didn't know what. The air itself seemed charged, like a storm about to break. Evans was still talking, voice slick with condescension. "You want to play soldier, old man? Fine. Every real warrior's got a call sign. What was yours, huh? Grandpa? Fossil? Relic?" He laughed. The two Marines beside him didn't. Lily tried to speak, but her grandfather's hand rose again, steady as stone. Then he lifted his head, really lifted it this time. His gaze locked onto Evans, and something ancient moved behind those pale blue eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like gravel under wheels. "My call sign," he said, each word slow and cold, was Iron Viper. The words hit the air like a gunshot. And before anyone could react, before Evans could even smirk, the grand double doors of the hotel burst open. Outside, the November wind rushed in, scattering programs and gasps alike. And through the doorway strode General Morrison himself, in full dress blues, eyes burning, presence like a hammer of command. Every Marine in the room straightened by instinct. Even the civilians felt it, that unmistakable gravity of authority earned, not given. But Morrison wasn't looking at them. He was looking straight at James O'Donnell. He stopped 3 feet away, boots clicking once against marble. And then, slowly, deliberately, he saluted sharp, perfect, and full of a reverence that silenced even breath itself. "Mr. O'Donnell," he said, voice echoing through the vast hall. "It's an honor, sir." Lily couldn't move. She looked at her grandfather, this quiet man who fixed radios in his garage and drank coffee at the diner every morning, and saw, for the first time, the weight of a life he had never shared. And she realized she didn't really know him at all. There was something about that night, the way the air changed, the way the young and the old faced each other across a century of service. She didn't understand it yet, but she would. Because every silence, every secret, every scar he carried, began with the name Iron Viper. And by morning, the world would know why that name still made men stand at attention. Why did the general salute him like that? The question looped in Lily's head as the lobby fell into stunned silence. Every sound, the hum of lights, the shuffle of dress shoes seemed to pull back, leaving only the echo of those two words, Iron Viper. She had seen her grandfather quiet a barking dog with a glance, calm a crying child with a touch. But she had never seen men like these, captains, colonels, hardened Marines, stand frozen in awe before him. And he hadn't done a thing, just said his name. General Morrison lowered his salute slowly, almost reluctantly, as if returning from a place of memory. The air between him and James felt heavy with things unspoken, names, losses, ghosts. When the general finally spoke, his voice carried none of the politeness he'd used in public ceremonies. "Sir," he said quietly, "you should have told us you were coming." James's reply came just as calm, wasn't planning to make a fuss. A faint smile tugged at Morrison's mouth, half grief, half respect. "Still the same," he murmured. Then turning, he barked to the room at ease. Every Marine in sight obeyed, though none could look away from the old man. Captain Evans tried to move, to say something, but the general's stare pinned him in place. The color drained from his face until he looked like marble, a statue of pride cracking in real time. Lily felt her own breath return, shaky but alive. She reached for her grandfather's hand. It was steady, always steady. But when she looked at him closely, she saw something flicker beneath that calm, a tiny tremor, like a storm held inside a fist. The general's voice cut through the air again, steady and cold. "For those who don't know," he said, sweeping his gaze across the crowd, "you are standing in the presence of a man whose service was never printed in any book, whose missions never reached any report. You enjoy peace tonight because of people like him, men whose names were erased so the rest of us could sleep." No one spoke, no one dared move. Morrison's eyes flicked to Evans. Captain Evans here appears to have forgotten that the measure of a Marine isn't written on a uniform. Evans opened his mouth, nothing came out. The general took one measured step closer to him. "You wear that insignia because men like this earned it for you, and you mocked him." He didn't shout, he didn't need to. The quiet was sharper than any blade. "You'll report to my office at 0600, Morrison finished. "We'll discuss whether you still deserve to wear that emblem at all." The young captain swallowed hard. "Why, yes, sir." James shifted slightly, his voice rough but gentle. "General," he said, "let the boy be." Morrison looked at him, surprise softening his anger. "Sir." "We were all young once," James murmured. "We all thought rank made us men. Sometimes it just takes a little humility to grow into the uniform." For a moment the room was entirely still, a stillness made not of fear, but of reverence. The general gave a small nod, eyes glinting with something almost like tears. "Aye, sir." That night blurred for Lily. Photos were taken, hands shaken, medals gleamed, but none of it felt real. What she remembered was the afterimage, the way the general had called her grandfather, sir, the way every Marine seemed to stand a little taller, speak a little softer when he passed. It wasn't ceremony, it was worship. After the ballroom lights dimmed and the guests drifted away, Lily helped her grandfather back to his room. He moved slower now, fatigue creeping into his bones. Yet his posture never broke. Even in exhaustion, there was pride, not arrogance, but quiet command. "Grandpa," she asked as they entered the suite, what was that all about? What, Iron Viper?" He didn't answer right away. He just eased himself into the armchair by the window, the city lights reflected in his glasses. Finally he said, "Something I was, a long time ago." "Were you special forces?" she pressed. "I mean the general, he saluted you, he saluted you." James smiled faintly. "Sometimes rank doesn't matter, only deeds." She waited. He didn't elaborate. The silence returned, that same deep, impenetrable quiet she'd known all her life. But this time she couldn't accept it. She moved closer, kneeling beside him. "Please, I'm serving too. I deserve to know who you really were." He looked at her, then really looked, and something in his eyes shifted from steel to sorrow. "Lily," he said softly, "knowing changes you. It takes pieces you can't get back. You sure you want that?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." For a long moment he just studied her, the set of her jaw, the spark of his own stubbornness reflected back at him. Then he nodded once slow. "All right." He began with a place name she'd never heard, Ashau Valley. He told her about a mission that didn't exist on paper. 5 men dropped into a jungle that ate helicopters for breakfast. Orders classified. Outcome erased. They were ghosts, he said. Vipers, they called themselves, striking from nowhere, leaving nothing but silence behind. Lily listened, heart thudding. He spoke of nights without stars, of mud so deep it swallowed rifles, of voices over radio that never answered again. He spoke of a boy, 19, who stitched that serpentine lightning bolt patch by hand, thread trembling between his fingers. "Did you make it out?" she whispered. His eyes went distant. 5 went in, 1 came home. The words dropped like stones in her chest. She wanted to ask more, what happened, how, why him, but his breath had gone uneven, his hand trembling slightly on the armrest. She stopped. "Rest, Grandpa," she said gently. "We can talk later." He gave a faint smile. "Later," he agreed. She watched him close his eyes, his breathing slowing. Outside, the city kept glowing, oblivious. Inside, the past stirred, restless, unfinished. By morning, the video was everywhere. Someone in the lobby had recorded it, the confrontation, the salute, the name Iron Viper. The clip spread across military circles, then the news, then the internet. Millions watched an old man humble an arrogant officer with nothing but silence and 2 words. Headlines called him the Ghost Marine. Comment sections filled with speculation. Who was he? What was Project Viper? Why was his file sealed? The Corps issued a statement, respectful, vague. "We honor the service of all veterans. Some histories are classified to protect ongoing operations." But to those who knew, it meant something deeper. It meant legends still walked among them. Lily scrolled through the comments, heart swelling and aching at once. Pride battled confusion. The world was learning what she hadn't, who her grandfather truly was. Yet something about it felt wrong, almost invasive. His life had been built on silence, and now everyone wanted to fill it with noise. Her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. "Cadet Evans," a woman's voice asked. "This is Colonel Henderson's office. He'd like to meet with you this afternoon regarding your grandfather." Her stomach nodded. "Is he all right?" "He's fine, ma'am. The colonel just thinks you deserve context." The headquarters was nothing like the glittering hotel. Concrete walls, fluorescent buzz, the smell of coffee and dust. Colonel Henderson waited behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from too many hours and too little sleep. He stood when she entered. "At ease, cadet, sit." She obeyed. "I served under your grandfather's command once," he said, "though he wouldn't remember me. None of us used real names back then." Lily frowned. "You mean you were?" He nodded. "Support staff for Project Viper. Logistics. We moved gear, not people. We didn't even know where they were going, just coordinates and silence." He leaned forward. "You need to understand, cadet. What your grandfather did, it wasn't conventional warfare. Those missions saved entire battalions, but they broke the men who carried them out." Her throat went dry. "What kind of missions?" Henderson hesitated. Then he pushed a sealed folder across the desk. The cover bore a single black stamp, DECLASSIFIED Limited Extract. Inside was a single photograph, 5 men beside a helicopter, faces half in shadow. One of them was unmistakably James, younger, eyes fierce beneath the brim of his helmet. On his sleeve, the same serpent and lightning bolt. They called him Iron Viper because he was fast, decisive, and merciless when he had to be, Henderson said quietly. "But that's not the part that mattered." "What did?" she asked. He met her eyes. "He brought them home every mission until the last." Lily's voice cracked. "The last." The colonel exhaled, long and slow. "That one went wrong. Intel was bad. They were ambushed. He called in fire on his own position to save a trapped platoon. 4 of his team didn't make it. He did. Barely. When they pulled him out, he refused evacuation until every one of his men was accounted for." He looked down. "After that he walked away. No ceremony, no parade, just disappeared until last night." Lily stared at the photo, her vision blurring. The man she'd known, gentle, patient, quiet, was the same one who had survived hell to save strangers. She whispered, "He never told me." Henderson's tone softened. "Some truths are too heavy to share, but they shape everything around them." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "He's earned his peace, cadet. Guard it for him." That evening, Lily sat across from her grandfather at the diner, the same worn booth they always used. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air, normal, comforting. He looked up from his cup. "Rough day." She smiled faintly. "You could say that." He studied her for a long moment. "They told you." She nodded. "Some of it." He took a sip, his hand steady again. "Then you know why I keep quiet." She swallowed. "They said you called fire on your own position." He chuckled softly, the sound of gravel turning to dust. "Sometimes that's the only way out." She looked at him, the lines on his face, the gentleness that had outlived the violence. "How do you live with something like that?" He set the cup down, eyes meeting hers, clear, unflinching. "By remembering what you did it for, and by forgiving yourself slowly." A silence settled between them, not empty, but full. A bridge of understanding finally built across years of questions. Outside, the sun dipped below the city skyline, bathing the diner in amber light. Later that night, as Lily drove home, she caught herself repeating the words he'd said at the ball. "The uniform is heavy. Sometimes it takes a while to learn how to carry it with grace." For the first time, she understood. Being a Marine wasn't about the medals or the orders or the salutes. It was about carrying what others couldn't, and doing it without needing to be seen. She didn't know what awaited her career, but she knew this. Whatever came, she would wear the uniform differently now, with humility, with honor, with the quiet strength of the man the world now called Iron Viper. because sometimes the loudest courage is the kind that never asks to be heard. Why did he never hang his medals? That question haunted Lily as she stood in her grandfather's garage the next morning, surrounded by the smell of oil, dust, and time. Everything was neat, tools hung in perfect rows, boxes labeled with military precision. Yet there was something sacred about the disorder on his old workbench: a rusted lighter, a stack of worn notebooks, and that jacket, the one with the patch. She ran her fingers over the serpent and lightning bolt, the stitches rough, uneven, hand-sewn. The cloth felt soft from years of wear, but there was strength in it too, like it had weathered storms and bullets and still refused to tear. She wondered what that 19-year-old boy had been thinking when he sewed it on, and whether he made it home. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of oil and leather. The world was noisy again, reporters calling, strangers sending letters, old soldiers trying to confirm legends. But here it was still. This was where he lived now, quietly, humbly, a man who had been to hell and decided never to speak its name again. Lily turned as the door creaked open. James stood there, in his flannel shirt and worn jeans, eyes steady. "Didn't mean to snoop," she said quickly. He smiled faintly. "You grew up here, you've earned the right." She hesitated. "They told me about a show, about the team, about the call you made." He didn't move closer, just studied her face, measuring not judgment but readiness. "And what do you think about it?" She met his gaze. "I think you did what had to be done." His expression softened, pride and pain in equal measure. "Then you understand more than most." A silence hung between them, thick with the ghosts of things unsaid. Finally she asked, "Grandpa, do you ever regret it?" He looked away, his voice quiet but firm. "I regret who I lost, not what I did. There's a difference." Later that day, Lily drove to the base. Her unit had scheduled a training exercise, close-quarters simulation, urban warfare, the kind of thing she used to approach like a test of skill. But now, everything felt different. Every order, every move, every breath seemed heavier. She could still hear her grandfather's words. "The uniform is heavy. Sometimes it takes a while to learn how to carry it with grace." Inside the simulation chamber, fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Her pulse was steady. Her squad, 4 cadets, looked at her expectantly. She was leading today. She hadn't realized how much leadership could weigh until now. "Remember," she said, voice calm, "we don't win by moving fast. We win by moving right." Her tone carried a new authority, not loud, not aggressive, just sure. They moved in formation, clearing rooms, calling targets. The echo of gunfire was simulated, but the rhythm was real, measured, deliberate. For the first time, Lily didn't hear the noise of her own fear. She heard silence, the same silence her grandfather carried like armor. When the exercise ended, her instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Hall, met her at the door. "Nice work, Evans," he said. "Tight control, calm under pressure." "Thank you, sir." He paused. "Different today, something change." She thought of the patch, the story, the quiet legend sitting at her kitchen table. "Yes, sir," she said softly, "something did." That night the diner was half empty. Lily sat opposite her grandfather again. It had become their ritual: coffee for him, tea for her, unspoken peace between them. He slid a small object across the table, a tarnished brass compass, its cover engraved with a serpent coiled around a lightning bolt. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I carried back then," he said. "Every man on my team had one. Only mine came home." She turned it over in her palm. The compass needle trembled, finding north. "Why give it to me?" He took a sip of coffee. "Because you're going to need it." Her brow furrowed. "Need it for what?" He smiled slightly, that cryptic, infuriatingly calm smile. "For finding your way when the world tries to tell you which way to go." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You and your riddles." His smile faded. You'll understand someday." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. It wasn't prophecy, it was farewell. The following morning, she woke to a call from Colonel Henderson. "Cadet Evans," he said, his voice low and grim, "you might want to come to St. Mary's Hospital. Your grandfather was admitted an hour ago. He collapsed at the diner." Her world went silent. The drive there felt endless, red lights blurring, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. When she arrived, a nurse guided her to a quiet room. He was awake, pale but awake. The oxygen mask lay beside him unused. He hated hospitals. "Hey, soldier," he murmured as she entered, voice rough with fatigue. "You drive faster than your old man did." She forced a smile, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You scared me." He gave a faint shrug, just an old engine sputtering. She sat beside him, gripping his hand. His skin felt thin, the veins like rivers under parchment. "You should have told me," she whispered. "About what?" "That you weren't invincible." He chuckled, a sound that broke halfway into a cough. "If I told you that, I'd ruin the myth." Her laugh came out as a sob. He squeezed her hand gently. "Listen, Lily," he said, voice dropping. "There's something I need you to do." "Anything." "In my desk bottom drawer there's a box. You'll know it when you see it. Bring it here." She hesitated. "Now." He nodded once. "Now." She drove back to his house, the small, quiet place that suddenly felt too still. The sun had dipped low, shadows stretching across the walls like memories. She found the box where he'd said metal, old, paint peeling. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, lay a cassette tape. A label written in neat block letters, Viper Mission 12. Her stomach tightened. She stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into her bag and drove back to the hospital. When she entered the room, he was asleep, or pretending to be. The rhythmic beep of the monitor matched the steady rise and fall of his chest. She sat beside him, holding the tape. "I found it." He opened his eyes. "Good, when I'm gone, play it once, then burn it." Her heart lurched. "Don't say that." He gave her that look, the one that ended arguments before they began. "Promise me, Lily." Tears filled her eyes. "I promise." He lasted 2 more days. No pain, no fear, just a quiet slipping away like a soldier walking off patrol for the last time. The Corps sent flags and flowers. The general himself attended the funeral. The entire procession stood at attention as taps played under a gray sky. But for Lily, the ceremony felt hollow. He never liked grand gestures. His greatness had always lived in the silence between words. After everyone left, she stood by the grave long after the sound faded. The compass rested in her palm, cold against her skin. "I'll find my way," she whispered. That night she sat alone in his garage, the metal box open before her. The tape glinted under the dim light. Her hands trembled as she placed it into the old player on the shelf. A crackle, then his voice. "This is Iron Viper Mission 12. Audio debrief restricted. If you're hearing this, then you're someone I trust." Lily's breath caught. The voice was younger, firmer, but unmistakably him. He continued, 5 of us inserted at 200. Objective, locate and extract Recon Unit Alpha 9 last seen east of the River Bend. Intel said small resistance. Intel was wrong. Static, then gunfire, distant, muffled, shouting. She gripped the table. He spoke again, calm amid chaos. 2 down, ambush from ridge line, we're pinned. Calling fire mission Bravo Zulu, danger close. A pause, then softer. If anyone finds this, tell them it wasn't courage. It was duty. Tell them we did what we had to and we did it together. The sound faded into the distant hum of helicopters, then silence. Lily pressed her hands to her face, shaking. He had recorded his own goodbye, not for glory, but for truth. Not for others to remember his strength, but to understand his choices. She sat there for a long time, letting the silence fill her. Then, just as he'd asked, she took the tape, stepped outside and struck a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges until the plastic twisted into smoke. When it was done, she whispered into the dark, "Message received, Iron Viper." Weeks passed, the world moved on. The story of the ghost Marine faded from the headlines, replaced by newer noise. But inside Lily, something had shifted quietly, permanently. She was no longer just a cadet chasing perfection. She was the heir to something deeper, a legacy of service that asked not for attention, but for integrity. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could almost hear his voice again. Grace under pressure. Move right, not fast. Carry the uniform with grace. She lived by those words now. Not because they sounded good, but because they had been earned the hard way. A month later, she received a letter sealed with the Corps emblem. Inside was a simple note. Cadet Evans, you are hereby recommended for advanced leadership training at Quantico, per request and endorsement of General Morrison. P.S. He would have been proud. She read it twice, her throat tight. Then she whispered to the empty room, "No, he is proud." That night, she opened the garage one last time before moving base. The jacket hung where it always had, the patch catching the last light of dusk. She ran her fingers over it, feeling the raised threads one final time. Then she smiled, not with grief, but with quiet resolve. She put the jacket on. It fit perfectly. Why did her training suddenly feel like déjà vu? The Quantico air was sharp that morning, crisp with frost, carrying the faint smell of pine and gun oil. Lily stood at the firing range, the rifle steady in her hands, her breath misted in the cold. Her heart was calm, almost unnaturally so. Every sound, the click of the bolt, the rise and fall of her breathing, the distant echo of instructors shouting at recruits, felt like it was happening underwater. Slow, focused, controlled. She wasn't just shooting at targets anymore. She was chasing ghosts. Her instructor, Captain Reyes, walked behind the line, his voice carrying that razor edge of authority that only came from experience. "Evans," he said, "you keep firing like that, you'll make my job obsolete." She gave a faint, respectful smile. "Not my intention, sir." He leaned on the rail beside her. "You got a stillness I don't see in most cadets. Where'd you learn that?" She adjusted her aim, eyes narrowing down the sight. "Family, sir." The shot cracked, dead center. Reyes nodded, impressed. "Whoever taught you, they knew what they were doing." She lowered the rifle slowly. "Yes, sir, they did." Later in the dorm barracks, Lily sat at her desk, studying the day's mission briefing. Her team, 5 candidates, had been selected for a special simulation exercise. Joint Branch Intelligence Recovery, simulated behind enemy lines. It wasn't routine training, it was elevated, classified even. But one thing caught her attention, the name at the bottom of the mission file. Operation Serpent's Echo. Her pulse quickened. That word serpent echoed through her head like a whisper from the past. She flipped through the pages. There was no mention of why it was called that, no connection to anything she knew. Still, something about it didn't feel like coincidence. By the time they deployed to the training zone, a vast, wooded stretch of land used for tactical immersion, the sun had dipped low, bleeding gold through the treetops. The exercise was meant to simulate a deep reconnaissance op, retrieve intel, extract without detection. "Evans," Captain Reyes called over the radio, "you've got command. Let's see if the stories are true." She frowned. "Stories, sir?" Reyes' voice crackled with a hint of humor. "About that family of yours. Word gets around, cadet." She exhaled slowly, even here. Her grandfather's legend had followed her into the field, an invisible weight she hadn't asked to carry. But now that she was here, there was no room for legacy, only focus. The woods swallowed the team in silence. The only light came from the moon, fractured through the branches. Lily moved at the front, her rifle raised, every step deliberate. Her radio hummed softly in her ear, the whisper of her team behind her. Then static. "Evans, this is Delta 3, one of her squadmates whispered. "You seeing that light ahead?" She crouched, peering through the night vision scope. A faint glow pulsed between the trees, too steady for campfire, too irregular for equipment. She motioned for a halt. "Thermal?" she asked. "Negative," came the response. "No heat signature." She frowned. That wasn't possible. They advanced slowly, weapons tight, nerves coiled. The glow flickered again, casting faint green across the moss. When they broke the tree line, Lily froze. Before them stood a rusted helicopter, its frame eaten by decades of weather. A Huey, the serial number barely visible on the hull. And on its side, half buried beneath vines, a faint, familiar symbol. A coiled serpent wrapped around a lightning bolt. Her breath hitched. It wasn't part of the simulation. "Command, this is Evans," she whispered into her mic. "We've located what appears to be an unscheduled wreck. No active personnel, requesting confirmation." Silence. She tried again. "Command, do you copy?" Nothing but static. Her team looked to her for direction. She raised a hand. "We check it. Stay alert." They moved closer. The metal groaned underfoot as she stepped into the wreck's shadow. The air smelled of rust and something else, oil, faint but still present after all these years. Inside the broken cockpit, vines had crept across the shattered panels. But one thing remained intact, a small, dented dog tag wedged under the control stick. She pried it loose, wiped the dirt away. "CPL Daniel Reese." Her chest tightened. She remembered that name. Colonel Henderson had mentioned him, the 19-year-old who had stitched the serpent patch on her grandfather's jacket. She stared at the tag, her hands trembling. This was real. "Evans," one of her teammates whispered, "what is this?" She swallowed hard. "It's history." Back at base, she sat in silence across from Colonel Henderson. The dog tag rested between them like evidence in a trial. He stared at it for a long time. "You found it." "You knew?" she asked quietly. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "We suspected the crash was out there. The coordinates matched one of the unconfirmed sites from Project Viper's last mission, but it wasn't supposed to be part of your exercise." "Then why was I sent there?" Henderson's eyes lifted to hers. "Maybe because someone wanted you to find it." She frowned. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back, expression unreadable. "There are things buried even deeper than your grandfather's record, Cadet. Things that were meant to stay buried." Her jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, you don't get to tell me that. You asked me to carry his name. I intend to understand it." A long silence. Then finally he nodded. "Very well, but understand this, the truth you're chasing isn't clean. It never is." That night she couldn't sleep. The dog tag lay on her nightstand, glinting in the dim light. She turned it over and over in her hand, hearing her grandfather's voice in her memory. "Sometimes knowing changes you." She was beginning to understand what he meant. But she couldn't stop now. She had questions, and for once, she had the courage to face the answers. The next morning, she visited General Morrison. The man had aged since the night at the Grand Majestic. His uniform was immaculate, his posture still commanding, but his eyes were heavier now, weighed down by decades of command decisions that never made the news. When she entered, he stood. "Cadet Evans." "Sir." He gestured for her to sit. "You've been busy." She met his gaze evenly. "Sir, I need to know what happened in the A Shao Valley, the full story." The general's jaw flexed. That operation was sealed for a reason. "I found the wreck," she said quietly. "The Huey, the dog tag." His eyes flickered, the briefest flash of pain. Then resignation. "I told your grandfather to leave that place buried," he murmured, "but I suppose he knew you better than I did." He walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a sealed envelope, and set it on the table. "Read it once, then burn it. That's how he would have wanted it." She hesitated. "Sir, what am I going to find?" The general's gaze softened, paternal, haunted. The truth about why he was the only one who came home. She opened the envelope that night in the silence of her dorm. Inside were 2 photographs and a short mission report typed on yellowing paper. Mission 12, Operation Viperfall. Her eyes scanned the words, each one a blow. Objective: extract down recon unit. Engagement with hostile forces. Mission compromised. Enemy coordinates misidentified. Friendly casualties 4 KIA. Surviving member LT James O'Donnell. Below that, a handwritten note in faded ink. Ordered airstrike on own position. Saved 62 Marines. Extraction denied. Self-exfiltrated under fire. And beneath that, a single line, separate, written in her grandfather's own handwriting. "Tell them we went willingly. We knew what it would cost." Tears blurred her vision. The moral weight of it hit her all at once. The impossible decision, the guilt, the silence he'd carried for decades. Not because he wanted to forget, but because remembering was too heavy. She pressed the photo to her chest, shaking, whispering into the dark. "You didn't fail, Grandpa. You came home for all of them." 2 days later, she stood again at the Quantico range. Captain Reyes joined her, curious. "You've been quiet lately, Evans. Something on your mind?" She adjusted her stance, her voice calm. "Just thinking about what it means to come home." He studied her face, seeing the quiet steel there, the same kind her grandfather had once carried. "You're turning into one of the good ones." She loaded the magazine, exhaling slowly. "No, sir, I'm trying to be one of the right ones." Her next shot hit the bullseye dead center. That evening before lights out, she pinned the dog tag inside her locker beside her nameplate. No medals, no pictures, just that. It wasn't a reminder of death. It was a promise of life lived with purpose. Days later, Colonel Henderson called her into his office. "There's a new initiative," he said. "A special training detachment, small unit operations, humanitarian and high-risk zones. They need someone with both discipline and perspective." Lily straightened. "Are you recommending me, sir?" He nodded. "Your grandfather once told me something I never forgot. Real strength is knowing when not to pull the trigger. I think you understand that better than most." She saluted. "Yes, sir." As she turned to leave, he added, "One more thing. The code name for the detachment is being revived, not officially, but as a spirit." She paused. "What's it called?" He smiled faintly. "Viper." That night Lily sat in her bunk, the compass warm in her palm. Outside, rain tapped the window, soft, rhythmic like rotor blades far away. She closed her eyes and whispered to the dark, "I'll carry it with grace." And somewhere, maybe only in her heart, she could almost hear him answer, "You already do." Because some legacies aren't inherited through medals or ranks. They're carried in silence, through choices, through mercy, through grace under fire. Why did the mission briefing sound too familiar? The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the tactical map projected on the wall. Lily sat among 7 other operators, Marines, intelligence officers, 1 Air Force pararescueman, all silent as the colonel spoke. "Your target," he said, his tone clipped and cold, "is a rogue militia cell holding civilians in a compound 2 clicks north of the border. We have confirmation that one of our missing advisors is among them. Extraction only, minimal engagement." Lily's eyes traced the topography on the screen, the dense forest, the river bend, the narrow ridge line. Something about it twisted in her gut. The colonel's voice continued. "Codename Operation Silent Coil. Duration 6 hours. You move at 200." That word coil. Like the serpent. Like the patch. Her pulse quickened, though she kept her face neutral. Across the table, Captain Reyes, now her field commander, noticed her expression. "You good, Evans?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir." But she was. Not at all. 2 hours later, the team loaded into the transport helicopter. The night air was thick with humidity, the rotors chopping through it in rhythmic bursts. Lily checked her weapon twice, then once more. Her hands were steady, but her heart carried an old weight. The hum of the engines mixed with the smell of fuel, and for a fleeting second, she imagined her grandfather sitting across from her, younger, eyes sharp, the same sound roaring around him decades ago. She wondered if he'd felt this same stillness before chaos, this quiet understanding that something was about to change forever. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. 2 minutes. Reyes gave a quick nod. Masks on, check gear. The red cabin light dimmed, bathing them all in a deep, blood-colored glow. Lily adjusted her headset, looked at the men around her, calm, ready, unaware of the echoes of history they were flying into. Then through the radio, "Viper team, you are clear to deploy." The descent was fast, too fast. The helicopter hovered a few feet above the jungle clearing, rotors screaming as the team rappelled down one by one. Mud splashed up around them as boots hit the ground. The air was thick, wet, and alive with noise, insects, distant gunfire, the whisper of leaves shifting. Lily's voice came low through the comms. "Viper 3, perimeter north. Viper 2, eyes on elevation. No movement until I confirm visual." Her tone was calm, crisp, command voice. Reyes had given her operational lead for this portion, a test of coordination under pressure. She moved like her grandfather once had, steady, deliberate, quiet. They approached the ridge line, and for the first time, Lily saw the compound through her scope. It was smaller than expected, a cluster of half-collapsed huts, one radio tower, and a handful of armed men packing around fires. But something was off. "Command, this is Viper 1, she whispered. "Intel said 1 hostage, I count 5. "Static, then. Copy Viper 1, prioritize the advisor, engage if necessary." Her jaw tightened. "5 civilians, sir, can't confirm which is ours." "Negative," the voice said sharply. "Objective remains the advisor. Do not compromise the mission." The words burned. Duty, efficiency, collateral tolerance. It was the kind of language her grandfather had hated, cold, detached, safe behind distance. She whispered back, acknowledged. But inside she didn't agree. They moved closer under the cover of darkness, shadows gliding between trees. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself was watching. Through her thermal scope, she could see one of the guards packing near the tower lean, nervous, his rifle slung carelessly. Another sat by the fire, nodding off. It would have been easy to eliminate them, efficient, quick. But easy wasn't the same as right. Lily crouched beside a fallen tree, checking her map. Reyes knelt next to her. "What's wrong?" he asked. "The mission's wrong," she said quietly. "Intel doesn't match. If we go in blind, those civilians are at risk." Reyes studied her face. "Orders are orders." She looked at him, the kind of look her grandfather had once given to men twice his rank. "Sir, with respect, orders don't see faces. We do." He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "You've got 5 minutes to make it right." They split into pairs. Lily and her partner, Corporal Nguyen, circled to the east wall. The structure's wood was rotted, easy to pry open. She slipped inside first, rifle raised, every sense tuned to the slightest sound. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with smoke. She could hear muffled crying. Down the narrow corridor, behind a locked door, she found them. 5 civilians, bound and frightened, one of them wearing a torn U.S. field jacket. The missing advisor. She exhaled slowly. Found them all 5 alive. Nguyen moved to cut the bindings. We'll need transport. Lily tapped her comm. Command, this is Viper 1. Objective secured. Request immediate evac for 5 civilians. The response came sharp, almost irritated. Evac limited to 1. Repeat, priority target only. She froze. Say again, command. Static filled her ear, then silence. She looked at Nguyen. They're not coming for all of them. Nguyen's eyes flicked to the hostages. 1 elderly woman, 2 children, a man, and the advisor, who was barely conscious. What do we do? Lily closed her eyes, hearing another voice, rough, calm, the echo of a memory. Sometimes you have to make the call no one else can live with. Her grandfather. She opened her eyes. We take them all. Outside, the wind shifted distant engines. The extraction chopper was inbound early, too early. Ray's voice came through the comm. Evans' status. Package secured. Multiple civilians, we're bringing them all. There was a pause. That's not the order, Evans. I know, she said quietly, but it's the right call. Evans. Sir, trust me. She switched frequencies before he could answer. The first shots came from the perimeter, warning bursts from the militia guards who'd spotted movement. Lily cursed under her breath. Move now. They led the hostages through the eastern exit, ducking behind trees as gunfire erupted. The jungle lit up with muzzle flashes. Nguyen returned fire, quick and precise, dropping 2 assailants before they could close distance. 200 meters to the LZ, Lily shouted. She heard one of the children cry, and without thinking she scooped him up, running through the mud and chaos. Bullets hissed through the branches, splintering wood inches from her head. Keep moving, she yelled. We're not losing anyone. The chopper appeared overhead, dark silhouette, spotlight sweeping the canopy. Reyes was already aboard, leaning out, eyes wide as he saw the civilians. Evans, you disobeyed a direct. Get them in, she screamed over the rotors. He didn't argue again. They lifted the advisor first, then the woman, then the children. Nguyen climbed in last, covering their flank. Lily was about to follow when a flash split the air, an explosion from the tree line, the force throwing her backward. Evans, Reyes shouted. Her ears rang, smoke filled her lungs, the world spun. Somewhere through the haze, she saw the downed grenade's crater too close to the chopper. One of the rear stabilizers was damaged. Evans, get in now, Reyes yelled. She pushed herself up, vision swimming. Take off, she coughed. Go. I'm not leaving you. That's an order. Their eyes met, and for a brief, wordless instant, he saw it. The same expression he'd seen on her grandfather's face in those classified mission photos. That impossible calm, the look of someone making peace with a choice no one else could carry. She raised her rifle, firing into the trees to cover their ascent. Evans, get out of there, the pilot shouted. But she didn't move. The chopper rose through the smoke, struggling to stabilize. As it climbed, her voice came faint through the comm, steady, almost serene. Viper 1 to command, civilians secure, mission complete. Then static. Hours later, extraction teams found her in the clearing, wounded but alive. A single piece of shrapnel had grazed her shoulder, and the rest was mud and exhaustion. The helicopter had made it out safely. Everyone survived. When she woke in the medical tent, the first face she saw was General Morrison. You disobeyed orders, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Yes, sir. You risked the entire operation. I did what my grandfather would have done. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. That's what worries me. She frowned, sir. He leaned forward, voice soft but firm. James O'Donnell spent a lifetime carrying the weight of his choices. You just picked it up. Make sure you know how to live with it. Her voice didn't waver. I already do. Weeks later, a report circulated quietly through the Corps, classified, internal only. It cited the success of Operation Silent Coil and noted one recommendation at the end. LT Lily Evans demonstrated exceptional judgment and restraint under fire. Her decisions directly saved 5 lives. Recommend permanent assignment. Viper Command Liaison. She never saw the report herself, but she didn't need to. The mission's echoes lived inside her now, every breath, every quiet moment, every memory of that jungle and the choice she'd made. That night, alone in her quarters, she took out the compass. The needle wavered, then settled north, unwavering, certain. She smiled softly. Guess I found my way, Grandpa. Some inherit medals, others inherit silence, but the rare few, they inherit the weight of mercy and carry it with grace. Why did victory feel like punishment? Lily Evans sat in the conference room under the glare of fluorescent lights, hands folded, uniform immaculate, expression unreadable. Across from her sat 3 men in dress blues, silent as statues. Their medals gleamed, but their eyes carried no warmth. A court of inquiry, not official, not public, but no less intimidating. She could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the click of someone's pen, and the heavy pause that always came before a verdict was dressed up as discussion. Colonel Abrams, head of Operations Oversight, cleared his throat. Lieutenant Evans, we're not questioning your courage. The record shows you saved multiple civilians and extracted the missing advisor. He leaned forward, voice tightening. But you disobeyed a direct order. Lily met his gaze evenly. Yes, sir. Do you understand the implications of that? Yes, sir, I do. He exhaled through his nose, not angry, but exasperated. This isn't a movie, Lieutenant. Heroism doesn't override protocol. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. With respect, sir, sometimes protocol gets people killed. The other officer, a commander from intelligence, leaned in, and sometimes breaking it does the same. Lily said nothing. The silence stretched, taut and deliberate. She could feel the weight of the institution pressing down on her, all the history, all the rules, all the things her grandfather had never said aloud but had clearly lived through. Abrams flipped a page on his file. You're fortunate that General Morrison filed a personal commendation. Without it, this would have been handled far less kindly. Lily nodded once. Understood, sir. He studied her, expression unreadable. You've inherited your grandfather's stubbornness. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. When it was over, she stepped outside into the cold gray morning. The bay stretched before her, concrete, fences, the steady rhythm of boots on pavement. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. Ray's caught up to her at the steps. You handled that well, he said. She forced a smile. Depends on your definition of well. He shook his head. They'll make an example out of someone else, not you. You sound sure. I'm not, he admitted, but Morrison's protecting you, that much I know. She looked toward the horizon, the training fields, the clouds heavy with rain. He protected my grandfather too, until he couldn't. That night her quarters felt smaller. She sat at her desk, uniform unbuttoned, the compass in front of her. The brass caught the faint light from the lamp, the serpent engraving now dull from touch. A knock broke the silence. Come in, she said. Colonel Henderson entered, his face drawn, his voice quiet. You and I need to talk. She straightened, sir. He closed the door behind him. What do you know about Project Viper? Lily's heartbeat quickened. Only what you and the general told me, classified unit, deep ops, last mission in a Shao Valley. He studied her face for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was ready for the rest. Then he said, that's only half the truth. He placed a worn folder on her desk. The label was blacked out, corners frayed. Your grandfather didn't just lead Viper, he tried to end it. Her eyes narrowed. End it. Henderson nodded slowly. Toward the end of his service, he discovered that Viper wasn't just running field missions. There were off-the-books operations, black contracts, civilian targets, even political interference overseas. He tried to shut it down after a shout. Lily felt her stomach twist. You're saying they used his unit for something it wasn't meant for? They used him, Henderson said. His reputation, his record to authorize missions he never saw. He walked away when he realized it. She felt her breath shake. And you kept this hidden. He sighed. He made me promise, said the truth wouldn't help anyone, said it would only destroy the core he loved. She looked at the folder, hands trembling slightly. Then why show me now? Because, he said softly, someone's trying to bring Viper back. Not in name, in function. Her blood ran cold. How do you know? Because the funding's moving again. New programs, same signatures. Different flags, same intentions. She opened the folder. Inside were intercepted memos, operation outlines, procurement contracts masked as logistical support. Every one of them stamped with the same internal code, V12. She recognized it immediately. Mission 12, she whispered, his last mission. Henderson nodded grimly. They're using his history to justify a new division, one with no oversight. They call it Viper Initiative. Lily stared at the papers, anger slowly building under her calm. He spent his life atoning for what they forced him to do, and now they're resurrecting it. That's why I came to you, Henderson said. You're the only one who can stop it, and the only one they'll never suspect. Over the next week, the world narrowed to secrets. Lily began working covertly under Henderson's direction, tracing the funding trail through encrypted databases. The deeper she went, the more it felt like stepping into her grandfather's shadow, that same quiet defiance, that same cold courage. Late one night, she sat alone in the operations hub, the screen's light washing her face in pale blue, rows of code reflected in her eyes. Each new line revealed another hidden hand, contracts tied to weapons manufacturing, surveillance programs disguised as humanitarian missions. And then she found it, a list of advisors. One name made her breath stop. Capt. Kyle Evans. Her pulse thundered, the man who once humiliated her grandfather in that hotel lobby. The man who'd been quietly reassigned to research and development. It wasn't research, it was recruitment. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the name. Fate had a cruel sense of symmetry. First, her grandfather had faced him in humiliation. Now she would face him in truth. The confrontation came 3 days later. The hallway outside the intelligence annex was dim, cold, and silent. She found Evans at the far end, standing at a vending machine, still carrying that same polished stiffness that had once defined him. He turned when he heard her approach. For a brief second, surprise softened his features, then caution. "Lieutenant," he said, "or should I say Viper?" Her jaw tightened. "You know about it." He smirked faintly. "Everyone who needs to know does. Your grandfather's legacy deserves to evolve. We're modernizing his vision." "His vision was peace," she snapped. "His record was efficiency," Evans countered. "We're building on that. The new initiative will operate without bureaucratic interference. Swift, decisive, necessary." She stepped closer, eyes burning. "You mean unaccountable?" He shrugged. "Accountability slows progress." "You sound exactly like the people he walked away from." Evans leaned in, his tone smooth, patronizing, the same as that night in the lobby years ago. "Don't confuse nostalgia with clarity, Lieutenant. The world's messier now. We can't afford sentiment." She looked him dead in the eye. "That's why people like you shouldn't be leading it." He smiled thinly. "Careful, Evans. Heroes don't last long when they go against the system." "Neither do cowards," she replied. She turned and walked away before he could answer. Behind her, the hum of the vending machine filled the silence, cold, mechanical, endless. That night, she met with Henderson again. "Evans is involved," she said. "He's recruiting for the Viper Initiative." Henderson rubbed his temple. "He's got backing high up. You can't just expose him. You'll need proof." Lily nodded slowly. "Then I'll find it." He gave her a look that was half admiration, half fear. "You're walking the same path your grandfather did." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but this time it won't end in silence." The next week blurred into a rhythm of secrecy. Encrypted drives hidden in plain sight, late-night calls from untraceable numbers, anonymous leaks to trusted allies in intelligence. Each move carried risk, but she moved like her grandfather once had, calm under pressure, eyes fixed on purpose. And every night before shutting her laptop, she whispered to the compass, "Guide me." Then came the message. It arrived through a secure channel at 200, a single line of text, untraceable sender. "You're walking where he fell. Turn back or you'll join him." She stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Someone new, someone inside the system. For a moment, fear gripped her, the kind that freezes even trained soldiers. Then she heard her grandfather's voice again in her mind. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Lily. It's the decision to move anyway." She took a breath, closed the laptop, and whispered, "Then I'll move." By morning, her report was complete, a full exposé of the Viper Initiative's funding trail, false contracts, and hidden chain of command. She encrypted it, duplicated it across secure servers, and delivered one hard copy to only two people, Colonel Henderson and General Morrison. She didn't know what would happen next, if they'd act, or if they'd bury it. All she knew was that she had done what her grandfather couldn't. She'd spoken. That evening, as she left the building, she stopped on the steps overlooking the base. The sun was sinking, bathing everything in deep orange light. She held the compass in her hand, thumb brushing the engraved serpent. For a moment, she thought she saw him, her grandfather, standing at the far end of the path. Not in his jacket, not in uniform, just himself, calm, proud, watching. She smiled. "I did what you couldn't," she whispered. "I told the truth." And in the fatting wind, she almost heard him answer. "You did what I hoped you would." Sometimes silence preserves the past, but truth redeems it. Why did telling the truth feel like loading a weapon? The base felt different the next morning. Too quiet, too still. As Lily stepped out of her quarters, she could feel it, eyes on her, movements that paused just a second too long, salutes that came a beat late. The air itself seemed charged, as if the walls were waiting for something to happen. By noon it did. She was summoned to headquarters, not by Morrison, not by Henderson, but by internal affairs. Two men in plain uniforms escorted her down the sterile hallway, their boots echoing like a drumbeat. Neither spoke. When they reached the room, she already knew. The folder on the table had her name on it. The officer across from her, a gray-haired man with the cold confidence of bureaucracy, didn't bother with introductions. "Lieutenant Evans," he began, flipping the folder open, "you've been accused of unauthorized access to classified material, dissemination of restricted documents, and violation of chain-of-command protocol." Lily didn't flinch. "I filed those reports under direct advisement of Colonel Henderson and General Morrison." He looked up, unmoved. "Both have denied authorizing your actions." Her breath hitched. "That's not possible." He slid a single-page statement across the table. Two signatures, Morrison, Henderson, both confirming her breach of protocol. Lily stared at the paper, disbelief cutting deeper than anger ever could. It wasn't betrayal she felt, it was the sting of understanding. They were protecting her the only way they could, by pretending she was alone. The officer leaned back. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of active duty and placed under administrative review. Surrender your weapon and ID. She placed both on the table without a word. Her hands didn't shake. She stood tall, saluted, and walked out. No one met her eyes in the hallway. She packed her things in silence that evening. The compass, the dog tag, the letter from the general recommending her. 3 objects, her entire world now distilled into symbols. Outside, the sky hung heavy with storm clouds. Rain gathered in the air, pressing low, impatient. As she loaded her duffel into the car, she saw Henderson waiting by the gate, no uniform, just an old man with tired eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said. He nodded slowly. "Neither should you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "They had to cut you loose. It's the only way to keep you clear if this blows up." "Clear?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You mean disposable?" He winced. "Lily." She stepped closer. "I trusted you. You said you'd help me end it." "I am," he said quietly. "You just can't see it yet." "Then tell me." He hesitated. "There's one more file. Your grandfather left it encrypted, personal key, restricted to his bloodline. I never opened it. I think he meant it for you." Her pulse quickened. "Where is it?" He reached into his coat, pulling out a slim black drive. He called it Viper Testament. "It's yours now, but if you open it, you'll have to live with what's inside." She took it, fingers brushing his. "I already live with what's inside, Colonel." He gave a weary smile. "You really are his granddaughter." Then he turned and walked into the rain. She drove until the road turned to dirt, and the sky broke open. Rain hammered the windshield, steady and relentless. She pulled off near a ridge overlooking the coast, a place her grandfather used to take her fishing when she was a kid. She remembered the way he'd sit silently for hours, eyes on the horizon, saying nothing. She used to think it was peace. Now she knew it was memory. She plugged the drive into her laptop. It asked for a key. She tried the usual dates, names, codes. Nothing worked. Then she remembered something he'd said once, years ago, when she'd asked why he never remarried after her grandmother died. He'd smiled softly and said, "Because the heart remembers even when the mind forgets." She typed HEARTRMMBRS. The screen flickered. And then his voice filled the car. "Lily," he began. His tone was calm, but it carried that same rough weight she remembered, a voice shaped by battle and silence. "If you're hearing this, then you've gone farther than I ever did, and that means you're in danger." She froze, eyes wide. "I left Viper because it became something I couldn't recognize. They called it efficiency. I called it madness. We started as soldiers. We ended as shadows. I swore I'd never let them use that name again." Static crackled, then his voice returned, softer now, almost fatherly. "You're probably angry. You should be. You're seeing what I saw, how the machine eats the men who build it. But don't make my mistake. Don't fight it with hate. Fight it with truth." A pause. "You'll find a document in the same folder, coordinates. They mark where we buried the original Viper logs. If they ever rebuild it, those files will tear the whole thing apart. But once you open them, you can't go back. People you know, people you trust, will turn against you, just like they turned against me." She could hear him exhale, slow, deliberate. "If you decide to finish this, do it your way. Don't be me. Don't hide in silence. Speak." The recording ended with a faint click. The car was silent except for the rain. Lily sat there, gripping the wheel, her reflection flickering in the laptop screen, pale, tired, determined. She opened the file. Inside, a map appeared, rough terrain, a remote island off the Pacific coast, near Okinawa. Beneath it, one word: redemption. By dawn, she was already gone. No base clearance, no orders, no backup. Just her, a rented cargo transport, and a storm pushing east. She flew low, below radar, following the coordinates. The ocean stretched endlessly below, gray and cold. Every gust of wind felt like memory trying to pull her back. Halfway there, her radio crackled. "Lieutenant Evans," came a familiar voice. "Captain Ray's." She hesitated before answering. "Sir." "You don't have to do this," he said. "Whatever you're chasing, it's not worth your career." "This isn't about career," she replied. "It's about ending what should have died with him." He sighed. "At least tell me where you're going." "You already know." Static. Then softly, "Bring him peace, Lily." She closed her eyes, whispering, "That's the plan." The island was small, barely a strip of land, jagged cliffs, jungle growing over everything. She landed the transport near the edge of an old airfield, abandoned and cracked. The wind howled through the broken hangars. She carried only a sidearm and the compass. The needle trembled slightly, then steadied north toward the ridge. It took her an hour to find it, a half-buried storage bunker camouflaged beneath roots and moss. The door's lock was rusted but intact. She forced it open, light slicing into the dark. Inside there were crates, maps, film canisters, and a single steel container marked Viper Classified. The air smelled of dust and metal and time. As she approached, she could almost hear his voice again. "We went willingly. We knew what it would cost." Her hands hovered over the latch, and then a voice behind her froze her in place. "Step away from the container, Lieutenant." She turned slowly. Captain Kyle Evans stood in the doorway, pistol drawn, rain dripping from his coat. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. "I warned you," he said. "You should have walked away." Lily's hand inched toward her holster. "You followed me." He smiled. "You made it easy. We've been tracking that drive for years. Henderson was supposed to destroy it. Guess he got sentimental." Her stomach tightened. "You killed him." Evans shrugged. "He made a choice like you're about to." He took a step closer. "Walk away now, Evans. Hand me the files and I'll make sure your record stays clean. You'll vanish quietly. You'll survive." Lily's voice was steady, quiet. "You think surviving means living." His jaw tightened. "You sound like him." "I am him," she said. And then silence. The kind that hangs between two people who both know only one is walking away. Evans raised his gun. Lily didn't flinch. "You're pointing that at the wrong Viper," she said softly. And then the thunder came. The rain erupted, heavy, relentless, drowning the sound of gunfire. Only flashes lit the bunker's doorway, brief bursts of light carving out two silhouettes locked in the oldest struggle there is, power versus principle. When the echoes died, only one figure remained standing. Lily staggered against the doorway, rain mixing with the blood on her sleeve. Evans lay still on the floor, his pistol skidding across the concrete. She didn't look back. She opened the steel container. Inside were folders, film reels, and sealed documents, every record of the original Project Viper. Names, missions, coordinates, proof. She took one deep breath, then pulled her phone from her pocket. The signal was weak but enough. She began uploading the files, not to one server but to all of them. If truth had a weapon, this was it. By the time the upload finished, dawn had broken. She stepped outside, the compass in her hand. The storm had passed, leaving the sky pale and wide and empty. The needle trembled, then pointed true north. She smiled faintly. "Home," she whispered. Then she tossed the compass into the sea. It wasn't that she didn't need it anymore. It was that she finally knew which way she was facing. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? 3 weeks had passed since the leak. And in that time the world had changed, not loudly, not with explosions or riots, but with quiet, bureaucratic chaos. Across government channels, encrypted servers flickered alive with the same payload, the Viper files. A buried history resurrected, decades of covert operations, false reports, and classified actions carried out under one name. Viper. Lily had done what her grandfather couldn't. She had exposed the truth. But truth, she quickly learned, doesn't save everyone. It simply forces the world to look, and some would rather go blind. Her name was never in the headlines. The files were attributed to an anonymous whistleblower. Yet inside the core, her identity wasn't a secret. She returned to the States under the quiet escort of military intelligence, not in handcuffs, not yet, but shadowed by silence. Her uniform had been stripped of its insignia, her rank pending review, her purpose undefined. Still, she walked with her head high, because she had no regrets. As she stepped through the gates of Quantico for the final debrief, a familiar voice met her. "Lieutenant Evans." She turned. General Morrison. He looked older now, more tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from years, but from seeing too much truth too late. "Sir," she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment. "You did it." She nodded. "He deserved the truth, sir." "So did the Corps," Morrison replied, "and the world. Then why does it feel like I just buried them both?" He sighed, his gaze heavy. "Because truth isn't clean, Lily. It never was." The debrief room was small, windowless, sterile, full of shadows cast by one single light. 3 officers sat across from her, none of them familiar. Civilians in suits, legal, political, untouchable. "Miss Evans," one of them began, "you've been charged with violation of federal security protocols, unauthorized disclosure of classified material, and gross insubordination." She didn't react. She'd rehearsed this in her mind 100 times. Another leaned forward. "You've also been commended for acts of valor, humanitarian intervention, and moral fortitude during Operation Silent Coil." They exchanged glances, as if confused by their own contradictions. Finally, the lead officer spoke. "General Morrison has filed a recommendation for clemency. Given your record and the sensitivity of the exposed material, this tribunal has agreed to a conditional discharge." She frowned. "Conditional?" He nodded. "No prison, no court-martial, but you're done. Effective immediately, you are honorably discharged. You will not wear the uniform again." The words hit harder than she expected. Honorably discharged, but exiled all the same. She nodded once, understood. They closed the file. And just like that, the book closed on Iron Viper. When she left the building, Morrison was waiting by his car. He handed her a small envelope. "From me," he said. She took it carefully. "What is it?" "A name, someone who deserves to know what you did." She looked down at the envelope. Handwritten small, simple, O'Donnell. Her breath caught. "My grandmother." He nodded. "She's still alive, lives outside Tucson. Your grandfather never told her what really happened. Maybe now she deserves to hear it." Lily's voice softened. "Thank you, sir." He gave her one last look, proud, regretful. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Then he turned away, leaving her in the sunlight that suddenly felt much too bright. It took her 2 days to drive there. The desert stretched endlessly, sand, sky, and silence. It was strange how peace and loneliness looked the same from a distance. The small house appeared like a mirage, weathered by sun and time. Wind chimes whispered in the breeze. She parked, got out, and stood there for a long time before knocking. An old woman opened the door, silver hair, sharp eyes that softened when they met hers. For a moment, neither spoke. "You look like him," the woman said. Lily swallowed hard. "Ma'am, my name is Lily Evans. I know who you are," she said, smiling faintly. "Come in, dear." The house smelled of cedar and old photographs. She saw pictures on the mantel, her grandfather in uniform, younger, unguarded. Next to it, a single folded flag, and a compass in a glass case. The same one she'd carried, its twin. Lily sat and, for the first time in months, let herself breathe. They talked for hours. Her grandmother listened quietly as Lily told her everything. The hotel, the mission, the initiative, the truth she'd uncovered. Every word was met with silence. Not shock, not fear, just the kind of stillness that comes when the past finally has a voice. When she finished, the old woman nodded slowly. "I always knew," she said softly. "He never told me, but I knew. The way he'd stare at nothing sometimes. The way he'd flinch at thunder. That kind of silence doesn't come from age, it comes from ghosts." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. He tried to stop it. "I know." Her grandmother reached over, taking her hand. "And you did." They sat there in the fading light, two generations connected by the same name, the same weight, the same promise. When Lily stood to leave, her grandmother pressed the compass into her palm. "He'd want you to have it." Lily smiled through the tears. "I already did." The woman looked at her one last time. "Then make sure no one ever forgets what it cost him." "I won't," Lily said softly, "or what it cost you." Months passed. The world moved on, as it always does. The Viper Initiative was quietly dismantled, buried again under a new name, new paperwork, new silence. But this time, people were watching. This time, it couldn't disappear completely. Lily moved to the coast, a small town in Oregon. No uniform, no rank, just a woman who had seen too much but refused to stop caring. She worked as a flight instructor, teaching young cadets who didn't yet understand what war really asked of them. She never told them who she was. But sometimes when one of them asked about courage, she'd smile and say, "Courage isn't what you show, it's what you choose not to hide." They never understood, not fully. But someday they would. One evening she sat by the water, the horizon glowing gold beneath a crimson sky. In her hands the compass, its brass worn smooth, the serpent barely visible now. The needle trembled, then stilled. She whispered to the wind, "It's over, Grandpa." A faint breeze stirred, and for a fleeting second she thought she heard his voice again, that deep, gravel-soft tone filled with warmth and pride. "No, Lily, it's just beginning." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then I'll keep walking." The tide rolled in, washing away her footprints in the sand. Above her, the sky deepened, stars emerging one by one, quiet witnesses to a story that would never make the news, but would live where it mattered most. In memory, in blood, in silence. Because that's what legacy really is. Not medals, not files, but choices that echo long after the world stops listening. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since it all began, she felt peace. Not the kind born of victory, the kind born of release. The wind shifted, carrying her whisper into the dark. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.